Bliss and Grit is an entirely listener-supported show. Supporting us is also designed to support you through keeping the episodes rolling, but also through rewards for your donation, like a getting started guide, a private forum, and downloadable meditations. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/bliss and grit. Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're having conversations about the awakening spiritual path and what does that mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, the beauty and the crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? Today, we're basically observing a different aspect of the nitty-gritty of transformation than what we spoke to last week. In this case, the moment when you're right up against the mechanics of your conditioning, and you can truly feel the edges, or in some case the wall, to what you're even able to conceive of or feel safe enough to receive into your life. We talk about the simple and profound beauty of discovering what one would truly like to have in their life as the walls of conditioning crumble more and more, and about how powerful it can be to find the operating mode of being pushed forward by pain being replaced by the operating mode of being pulled by vision, as inspired by the Rev Michael Beckwith. If you're enjoying the show, there are a few ways you can help support us. We would love it if you would leave a review on iTunes. This helps more people to find the show and also is just generally delightful to us. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe. We send out a weekly digest, basically, of the resources that we're finding useful and loving at any given moment. Or you can consider becoming one of our supporting members on Patreon, which is patreon.com/blissandgrit. And we also both see clients privately to help people on their path, the sticky places, the places that work out better when it's close one-on-one partnership, looking at those things. So you can feel free to go to the website for more information on that too. And last thing before we head into conversation, there is occasional swearing, so headphones if you need them. Okay, here we go. Hello, Vanessa.
Hello, darling.
It's good to see you.
Yes, hello.
So, as many people listening know, we are in the midst of a daily practice called DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining Systems. And so as I'm doing that for a little over a month now, I'm not going to go into what the practice is or any of that kind of stuff, or even why we chose to do it. It's in other episodes. The practice isn't, but the why. But one of the pieces of this practice that we're being asked to do is to imagine what we would like. Now, I've always been the kind of person, I'm really good at dreaming. I'm very creative. I'm very entrepreneurial. I like delight. I'm very good at fantasy scenarios, for better and for worse. And so when I was getting acquainted with this piece of the practice, I was like, yeah, that's easy peasy. That's totally my wheelhouse. It's not going to be a problem to essentially go through embodied fantasy. What would it feel like to have this kind of outcome in my life or scenario? And what I'm encountering is that as my conditioning falls away, as I continue to dismantle that related to this layer right now, I have so much awareness of just how challenging it is for me actually to really simply articulate what I would like, meaning basic things. So not like a mansion in Tahiti, because I think oftentimes we swing the pendulum to this far opposite extreme. I mean, really up underfoot stuff that I would like in my life, because I very quickly, the mental movements are around what I have to do, how things have historically gone, what I have to make sure to keep in mind. So it's been fascinating to actually embody meaning the way I'm using it right now. Really feel what I would like, genuinely, and really allow myself to step into that feeling instead of making it a hazy fantasy over there. And as I've been doing that, I was thinking about my mother's 70th birthday, which was a couple years ago, but I had this very direct experience of watching this in her. Now I'm watching it in me. At the time, I thought I was so much better at this, than my mom and my poor mom. So what she was going through, it's her 70th. It's a big deal birthday. And so we wanted to do something special for her 70th, as one does with the big decade birthdays. And my mom, not so much. Like, she's not a big party person. She doesn't like a ton of attention. And this is the first time that I ever really saw her struggle with her aging, in the sense that 70 felt to her like a scary number. Like, she was up against her mortality. Her younger sister has already passed. Her dad died in his 70s, and she was not feeling like a party. And so I was having conversations with her to try and plan it. And so I just kept using this phrase, well, what would you like? What would you really like, really enjoy to do for your 70th? We can do anything, including, eating Wendy's on the couch. We can do whatever you want. We can go to a Broadway show. We can do a weekend trip. And every time I would ask her this, well, what would you really like? I would watch her move into these different patterns. So codependence, right? Like, well, you guys are so busy, you don't need to make a fuss. It's no big deal. Or move into what should happen. I'm sure that you guys want to do, it's so nice that you want to do something special. I guess we could probably have a small party. What would you really like? And so on and on and on, just watching the dodging of the ability to even imagine that she's allowed to want what she wants and have what she wants for her birthday celebration. Like, it's not even complex, right? Like, we want to celebrate you in the way you want to be celebrated. And I'm watching that in myself now in so much detail, and it's just really fascinating. So I wanted to bring this to the table as a conversation about, you and I talk a lot about the nervous system. Like, we're always running these patterns that have been inherited to us through our lineage or through our culture. And at this point, I'm in my mid-40s. It's pretty rote. They run pretty quickly. And now I'm introducing this hiccup in the system, and I'm seeing how challenging it is to really simply ask for what I would like. And in this case, what I'm referring to for myself is mostly where I'm seeing it the most distinctly is around work stuff. And that there's these patterns of how I've worked for the last 20 years, which is a client-based model. And there's a feeling of how it feels like, well, I have to make sure to collect this many acorns. Winter is coming. It's kind of the feeling. It's like squirrel brain. And then it's like, go and dream. What would you really like? And here I am, somebody I make multiple creative projects. Like, this is not outlandish for me to do. And yet I will keep going back to the pattern of, well, how do I collect the acorns? And once I've collected all the acorns, then I can start to entertain what I would like. And then my practice will say, no, really, what would you like right now? Okay, when will it be safe to ask for what I want? When will I know what it really feels like to have what I want? And so just thought we could get into, sort of like we did in our last episode, like when you're up against these very nitty-gritty pieces of transition, sometimes you encounter things that are pretty surprising. And how do we feel into, in general, what a change feels like when we felt the opposite for so long, and specifically what we would like? How do we let ourselves feel what we would like, even if we're people like me who think of ourselves as like pretty well versed in how to do that.
Sure. That was very well articulated, and I know what you mean. How I've been turning this over in my head is I think it gets particularly cloudy or challenging when we're at those really core belief structures, like the ones that form our default mode network, the ones that are our heuristic models. And the way that I've been thinking about it is, let's pretend we have a core belief, and let's pretend the core belief that we inherited and accepted from life, our family, whatever, wherever it came from. Let's pretend it sounds like you will never be abundant. Let's pretend that that's the belief that one accepted into their being. Then, if that is reality, which our beliefs are our reality. So if we, at an innocent, ripe age, believe that to be reality, like you're not going to get abundance, it's not coming your way, then we would come up with a counter strategy. The counter strategy may sound something like, well, then I will never expect abundance. I will never expect it. Now, if it was a reality that you would never, never, never have abundance, it seems intelligent that one would accept, I'm using air quotes, accept and expect for it not to arrive, and then just readjust to life. Like, I'm never going to have financial prosperity, but, I'll just have a lot of good friendships, and I'll have meaning and satisfaction, and it will come up with a different strategy. So that's just one example of the kind of core beliefs we can have. We can have beliefs that say, I'm unlovable, or we could have beliefs that would say, I will only deserve goodness when, right? So we can have all sorts of core beliefs, but whatever these structural belief systems of our survival network are, at the time that we created them, they felt real. And what I'm noticing from working with clients and within myself is they're very simple and very binary and very dualistic.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to have abundance, so I won't expect it. Expectation equals pain, and it's like, boom. And it's just this very solid kind of rigid structure. For example, if I put myself out there, I'm not safe. And so, don't put yourself out there. Do everything but put yourself out there, right? And so there are these operating systems. So then you could imagine that in these particular areas where you have these kind of foundational beliefs, you would do a thing like dim your imagination on it, right? Like, so if you don't believe fundamentally you could have love, or, that you're worthy, or that prosperity could come your way, like whatever your variety of it is, it means you inherited that model from somewhere. So somewhere, let's just stick with abundance, you didn't see abundance being modeled for you, the attitude and the energy of abundance, since that's the most important model. B, you really, really believe it's not coming your way, right? So you don't have a beautiful model of it. You don't believe it's coming your way. Don't dream too big on it, right? Like, dull it out. Yeah, this is all like how I'm starting to picture it for myself, because I'm seeing like the absolute intelligence of the way these things get structured. Like when we're confronting it in ourselves, especially some of these painful beliefs, I think it's like easy to say, oh, maybe I don't love myself, or I don't treat myself in a loving way because I can't nourish a dream, or because I can't hold a good intention, but when you understand that it was probably fair to say it's an act of self-love, that if we believe A, we do B in response, we can start to get like, okay, in intelligence, based on having mistakenly, erroneously believed and accepted this reality, I came up with all of these strategies, these coping strategies, and I'm still using them. The problem is these coping strategies are a reflection of an erroneous belief. And yet that erroneous belief is running in the background, right? It's running the programming. And it's like in the blink of an eye, unconsciously influencing and filtering my decisions, my choices, my imagination, my daydreams, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm thinking about recently, do you know the show Grand Designs?
No, never heard of it.
August and I, my son, for those listening, and I watch it a lot. It's this awesome show. It's like a British reality show, so already it doesn't have as much of the like pizzazz. And it's these, either some of them are architects or self-builders, but it's people building really cool homes. And they're not necessarily the fanciest homes, though some of them are. Some of them are really simple, but they're just unique and interesting. And this is one of our favorite things to watch. We love to watch this. Like the couple that built this wooded lot and didn't want to damage a single tree or a single tree root. So they like built this stilted tree house where this, they had to perfectly design where the stilts would go in the earth. So it's a total joy for us. We love it. And at one point we finished watching an episode. He turned to me, he's 12, and he goes, I wish I could be the kind of person who could build a cool house like that in my life. Oh, well. And I was like, it's that thing as a parent where you're like, I passed it on, And so I looked at him and I was like, you realize you're 12, right? Like there's this whole life that's full of mystery and miracles and joys and delights that you don't even know what's coming. And if your heart desires to have an experience like that, who knows if it'll stay with you or not, but if it does, like, why couldn't you? And some of it's tied up in me and then other lineage stuff, his dad's side, his grandparents. Some of it's tied up in school. School is a very profound conditioning ground, right? No, you're the kind of one who's not good at math, so where would you make money? Like the ones who are good at math are the ones that are going to wind up making money. All these kinds of things that filter in. And I could just see the relief on his face. He's like, oh yeah. I was like, I'm 44. And I hope that I get to build a unique house or live in a lovely, unique house that someone else built. Why wouldn't I, And I'm way older than you. He was like, right. But just having to notice the ways it gets in, right? The conditioning is this soup that we're swimming in and that we pass on in innocence, and that gets passed on in innocence and in confusion, right? There's a lot of confusion in a belief form, like the ones who are really awesome in math class are the ones that will be rich. Like that's just confused. It doesn't really make sense if we look at reality. So it's great to have a moment like that where we can pop the bubble of beliefs, especially in someone young. It's great when I can pop the bubble of belief in myself, or that happens through an epiphany or something that passed along to me in a teaching. And then the other piece that's really interesting, like you were saying, these really core ones that got in there at a very, very young age and were just absorbed into the being as truth. As we dismantle them, and I don't have an answer to this, but I'd love us to kind of freestyle, think about it a little bit. What do we do in order to be capable of feeling something that our being at a way young age decided was totally off limits? So, because I think that the ability to feel free to imagine, free to have, in Matt Kahn's words, safe enough to receive, is very foreign. And so there have to be ways to practice in our beings the ways to feel that. So in our case, in my case, right now, having a daily practice that involves, among other things, embodied gratitude and imagining a future that feels and looks a certain way, and that it is a committed daily practice is making a world of difference, because I didn't see this stuff before until I was steering the ship in a different direction. And then I realized, wow, this feels way more unfamiliar actually than I thought it would feel. So daily practice is huge for me. And are there other ways that we can think of to rehearse the feeling of possibilities that we couldn't have even entertained before?
Let me just say, I guess, what I've been noticing. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because I ran up against it as I was looking at one of the core things I'm inviting into my life, and then the core beliefs and imprints that were underpinning it not having arrived yet. And at first, it was really hard to find an imagination. And then I did. I actually got some support for it. Someone was talking me through it, just kind of, I guess, inspiring me, really, because it came out of me ultimately. But once it did, right, so once I could sort of see the architecture of the imprint that was driving this energy and making it seem unsafe, making it feel impossible, unthinkable. Once I could see the actual architecture, right? So awareness, which means I'm now aware, I'm in a different consciousness, and I could look at it, and then I could find a new vision, like a new picture for something else, which you and I are both working with visions. I found it wasn't as hard as I would think to actually get the feeling, but I kind of had to see it all like in relief, right? I had to see, oh, this is what I've been operating with. This is what has been kind of driving the bus, right? All these years and influencing the way I experience my reality. And then it took me a bit to get a visual for like a new way of being. So if we were to use that abundant example, then somebody is like, for example, if they have a new vision, maybe they're standing in front of the house they just closed on. And they're going, oh my God, I love my house. I feel amazing, right? So that's like a new vision of abundance. Let's pretend. What I found is once I got through all of that, I found a vision, which was a little clunky. I saw the structure. I probably did a bunch of like Matcon meditation in between to get into
just to get dosed with some yum yum
consciousness. Right? Yeah, because it really helps when you're in a different brain wave than your like tense, high stress beta wave, which might be your everyday mind.
Critically important. Yeah.
And then once that all came together and integrated, it wasn't really difficult. It was a little more like what you were describing with your son. Like, you can do it differently. And you're like, oh. And I come back to that pain pushes until vision pulls quote that we used. It's actually Michael Beckwith saying. And I'm like, right, okay. So there is a young part in us, a fresh part, a new part, an engaged part that wants the new information. It's just that it was so taboo to visualize a new dream, perhaps, to that reality. But once we can support ourselves in getting there. So, it helped to have someone to talk to who doesn't have limiting belief systems. Yeah. Right? Because this is one of the problems that I think it's useful to bring up when you were describing what your son was exposed to. It's whatever you went through, your lineage, your your parents, your ex-husband's parents, school, friends, social media, right? The news, TV shows we watch, all of these things are what we could call the collective. And the collective holds certain ideas, and you can see limiting beliefs everywhere in the collective. Oh, you want to be an actor? Good luck. Only a very few people make it. Oh, people who don't do math can't make money. Oh, you want to help people? That's really hard. People burn out a lot, right? Love is compromise. Love is hard work. Love is sacrifice, right? we could see how many beliefs are kind of circling in the collective that can make an impression upon us if we see it. So when we talk to a friend about these things, or a support person, whether it's a coach or whomever else, it's really helpful that they're not sharing their limiting beliefs with you.
Yeah, right. And that they have a different core architecture that you can feel into, like, oh.
I mean, at the very least, if they have spaciousness, because I think, for example, you probably find this when you're wearing your coaching hat, you could be pretty blank slate about things. So it's like I may sometimes have at my bedrock, like, oh, I'm not lovable if everybody's unhappy with me. But when another person is holding that, I'm like, no way, you're the most lovable thing in the world. It's independent of all, external things. And my body is fully resonant with that field. But someone needs to be completely open and spacious. This is just the caveat, because too often we may say to our friend, well, I feel like I can't create abundance. And they're like, well, that's a practical viewpoint. And you're like, there goes the dreamer in you, right? Mm. So I think, we could be a little bit mindful of who we're sharing with. We could be mindful of what we're taking in, as we're trying to allow this aspect of being to find a new vision, a new reality that's possible for it, that it's going to familiarize yourself with. And then these altered states of consciousness, which we could also look at on a physiological level and say they can be altered brain frequencies, right? Altered states of neurochemistry. But these more transcendent states or transcendent brain waves, I think, can be really supportive in helping us unlock the subconscious and unconscious and resort and reintegrate and then have a more expansive view.
Yeah. And if you can feel, so for myself, if I can feel what contraction feels like, oh, I can't go there. I'm trying to go there. I'm trying to feel what a different way would feel like. And I
can't.
How you can
feel the ends of your neurological limits.
Yeah. It's really like coming up on a wall.
Yeah. Like when I do muscle activation technique, you can feel when your brain and your muscle aren't firing fluidly. Like I can literally feel my brain going, where is that muscle?
Yeah.
It's like a wall. It's interesting.
Yeah, you can feel it in a really tangible way, like you're describing with motor control. And then we can feel it on our path too. If it's like, I know there's a land over there. I see that other people live in that land. I know how to imagine things. I'm extremely creative and imaginative. I know how to like and enjoy things, but I can't go over to that land. And what I've been doing is actually working with a course that it's not just hypnotherapy, but it's a woman, Carmen Spagnola. Do you know her?
No.
I'm really enjoying it. She's a hypnotherapist among many other things. But there's a portion of it that is basically a meditation, self-hypnosis, trance state, whatever you want to call it. It's shifting brain states. And I have added it to my daily practice and my nighttime practice. So I do my whole DNRS, and then I also do this because I discovered I actually need to be walked into a different state of consciousness here, where I'm feeling the end of my limits, my capacity to go to a different place. Or like you were saying, watching Matt Kahn talks or, whatever it is that does it for us. And by does it for us, it's like you can soften, you can open, you feel totally safe to be open, safe to exist. There's delight, there's enjoyment. All of those things start to come to the fore as sensations. And that's when I know, okay, I can start to go beyond where my end zone was before. And I'll just bring this in because I kind of find it super fascinating that as I've been doing that, speaking of co-creation with life is dropping me these little, oh, you were kind of feeling out, like, for example, what an amazing school situation would be for your son. Oh, there's this new place that opened, over there in that other town. Maybe go check it out. And going to visit, and I must have seemed catatonic to the director of the program, because I couldn't believe how perfect it was. It's like when you go on that first date and it's like with the person you're going to marry or someone who you're going to have an amazing whatever with, where you're like, I can't believe how good our chemistry is. I can't believe how much this flows. I can't believe I knew we would have some stuff in common, but this much in common, who would have ever guessed? Like that feeling of like, this is more miraculous than I was even capable of perceiving.
Yeah. Right.
And life goes, here's not even like you being good at imagining something. Here is a scenario that is so beyond your ability to conceive of what is like perfect. So nourishing in so many ways I can't even describe. Like, I'm not just talking about like, oh, that's a cool private school. Like, no, this is like the future entered our world of duality and it exists in my state. And it's like a whole new way of educating kids and being community and blah, blah. And of course, because life is so smart and hilarious, like it also has these embedded tendrils that require that I have to figure out things that are related to my other imagining. So my tangible in-person Rolfing work, which has been shedding, will have to go away more for me to be able to pull off the time and commute schedule with this. But they have a co-working space attached. So my digital work can actually happen right on site. So it's like, oh, and here's this little extra invitation to the reality that you actually want more of. But it has to actually come through in order to have this other little miracle. And it's just been like funny and so refreshing and interesting to see this dance with life. Like, I don't know how this is all going to go down, but it's like, all right, you want to feel past the boundaries of your ability to imagine a different kind of life. Like, here's something in one big package that goes, check it out. See how's this feel? Oh, P.S., there are requirements in order for it to come true that you have to step into what you actually want in order for it to work. Just a little heads up, just P.S. And at the same time that my Rolfing office is blowing up every day, like leaking roof and then electrical problem and this has been going on since the summer. So it's just funny because it's like getting kicked out of the nest. Here's the other nest. It's a better nest, but it requires that you step into actually what you're working on. You can't just phone it in.
Well, it is what I'm realizing is, okay, so if you see the erroneous belief pattern that's running, right? That's taking up space in your hardware, so to speak, and then influencing your software. And you are the consciousness. So you are untouched by that belief once we are actually aware, right? Which most of the time we're not. We're just not aware of what's running, and that's fine. That's mostly the human condition. But we wake up to it. We get aware and we see it. And we see, kind of how it got created. And then we see a vision for something new, whether it's life presenting it or us creating it as artists in our imagination or both. Then what I've noticed is it does seem to require some movement or courage or choice. There's like an inflection point where you have to really step over and around whatever that belief system was. Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean this in a very simple way. It's like, let's say your belief system is, I'm not good unless everybody's happy with me. Right. Which would be kind of a very familiar codependent belief structure. Right. So then someone's not happy with you and the body goes to the old program, as it will. If it's unconscious, it just runs. That's the default. And the default starts to go, I'm bad. How could I do that? What did I do so wrong? Why did I do that to that person? What's the matter with me? And then you go, oh, That's the default program. Mm-hmm. That's the structure. I see it, right? And then, okay, I know it's an error pattern, right? Because we've developed that level of awareness. I know it's an error pattern. I know it's just running itself. It's a program. But I know that I have to have my consciousness driving the bus, not the error pattern, right? Like I got to shuffle around the seats in the car. I got to put my consciousness, my soul at the driver's seat, my awareness at the driver's seat. And then I have to choose different than my program. And that's, whatever that is for all of us. It might be a process for some. It might be instantaneous for others who already know they're God and they're the light and they're one with everything. But it is what it is for you, right? And everyone will find their way home once they have the awareness. Or it can look like what you were describing, Brooke, maybe a more tangible, circumstantial thing like, okay, so I'm being invited to let this go, which requires the little risk of stepping over a belief system called, I don't know what your belief system is, that may make it hard to step into digital reality, fully owning it, embodying it. But, whatever that belief system is, I'm going to have to step over that and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is really interesting. It's why I've been relating to Michael saying pain pushes until vision pulls so much when I've been observing myself in these kinds of practices and observing clients with this level of understanding. So I'm like, right, okay. So I got, quote unquote, pushed to meditation early in life. I got pushed to spiritual seeking. A lot of my motivation was really, I was just in so much pain, I needed a way through it, right? And that's fine. There's no problem with that. That's a wonderful motivator for a lot of us, and it opens beautiful doors. But there's something different. And I think this is why that dream that you're talking about is so important. There's something different about having something pull you forward. Yeah. You can feel like the magnetism of it and the inspiration and the courage that we get when we have an inspired vision. It's like there's so many things we can confront in life. We can confront others criticizing us or judging us. We can confront a lot of work. We can confront fear. We could do so much when we have an extremely inspired vision that clicks in, that means something to us, you know? So I love that we can have a new imagination and we'll all find it. Like you're pointing to, ooh, don't worry, it can be clunky. And I really think my opinion, Brooke, is I used to be able to have just what you were saying, lots of fantasies. But when I got into the actual process of transformation, so I had to slow down and go, what is the actual vision? Like, what is the actual image that will inspire me to move past this pattern and step into something new? And like, what would that new be if it was reflecting that this pattern is no longer there, right? Like, so now we're like really in intimate relationship with how the error pattern got stored and what would be the antidote to that. That's where I'd blank out. And I think that's just reflective of now we're getting real about it. It's not just a fantasy like, oh, and then I'm going to, have a 200-person retreat and make a ton of money or like, whatever, like any kind of fantasy you could have had in the past that was so easy to imagine. Now it's like we're getting really close to the energy field of the pattern. And then we're like, what is the actual antidote? And so then we're starting to realize, okay, I'm fumbling around in the dark because I have never created actual networks for this to have a real imagination because that was probably off limits at some point.
Yeah.
Right. So then we're like, okay, so I need to like lovingly and gently and consciously keep stoking this fire and it will burn.
Right.
It will burn.
I think that's the huge shift, right? Because fantasy is just something that would be cool.
Yeah, cool.
Like I could fantasize about going on safari in Africa, and that would be amazing. I think that sounds amazing. And maybe someday my spirit will really call for that to happen. But is that really what my being right now is really calling to that I have something to untangle so that I can experience that exact reality. In my case right now, no, it's just not that important to me. And like you were saying, pain pushes. If pain pushes is the model, the operating model that we've had for so long, we forget that there's this other part of the equation that vision pulls. So pain pushes is like, well, I mean, do I hate my Rolfing work? It's like, no, I don't. I've been really glad to do this work for nearly 20 years. How lucky am I? Would I like to do more embodied coaching? Like, yeah, that would be great. I would really like to do more of that. But I'm happy to do both. They're fine. Like, as far as earning a living, they both serve and they're both client-based work. And it's like, everything was just sort of looking for, is there enough pain here to force me to make a change? And the answer is no. It's not. It's not agony. So then the difference is, okay, so I don't need to rely on pain to shove me into a new reality. Vision can pull me, and I feel really grateful that a vision arrived that I really like. I mean, okay. I kept walking around on the tour and just saying, oh, okay. Like, I was kind of in shock. Like, okay. And then I would ask a question to the director and she would give me an answer and I'd be like, oh, all right. Oh, okay. Like, I just couldn't, it was so amazing to me. And how great, because whatever becomes of this particular scenario, it's something that my being, this being right now, deeply wants. I deeply want that and everything that winds up getting tied into it, how it changes what I step into for my work life and how I identify in my career. Like, am I an in-person client-based business? That's been shedding. It hasn't been agony. I haven't been forced to let go of it. But now something actually calls me to step into something different. In a like, ooh, suddenly there's delight. Suddenly there's wonder. Suddenly it feels like this little sparkly, winky miracle that I want to engage with, which is different than, well, is it agony? If it's not agony, why would you give it up?
Well, right. Also, because remember, not only that kind of like natural level of like, why go through it? This is all fine the way it is, right? But whenever you set up the belief that's running, whenever that was set up, however we phrase it, that was kind of a life or death thing. Like, This is the advisable path, right? And now we're asking ourselves to move past what we imagined was safe and advisable. And for what? Like, if I was going to
for like a lateral move of like, it's good. It's fine. I'm happy.
Yeah. If I'm going to confront, all of my fear around patterns that have to do with self-worth or health or prosperity. And it felt in my system like, if I do this, then I can't connect with my family anymore, and I can't identify with my mom, and I offend her and I hurt her, or then I am not the good one and I will not be deserving of love and affection, right? So these are major pain patterns for us. They're really scary, really painful. So if our program says, if that, then like, am I going to be really inspired by eating gluten again? Maybe not. I mean, I could give up gluten for the rest of my life. That's no problem, no sweat. I'd rather be safe and know I'm going to be loved and good, for example, right? Depending on how your pattern got wired, I'm just making something up. But let's say you found yourself trying to rewire a pattern around health, and the new vision was, I want to travel to Africa and I want to hike a mountain. And I want to know I can eat everything there, and that I have like the resilience to be on a flight, and that I could like dance with people, when I arrive. Like something like that. If that's heartfelt to you, it has to be genuinely meaningful and heartfelt and aligned for your soul and yummy. Now that all of a sudden gives you some courage to take that leap of faith that says, if you do this, be careful because, fill in the blank. So I think we can all get there. What I think is kind of fun about the process of fumbling around in the dark for whatever period of time that is that you brought into the conversation, Brooke, is that we get to find what moves us.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's this wonderful exploration. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Like I always feel we can be so stuck in time, right? But we know time is related with the body, is related with matter, is related with ego. They all kind of run. So if we're really hooked in time, we know it's usually the pattern itself that's wondering how long everything's going to take, yada, yada. But I always think, like, let's say you had a child and they weren't walking when you expected them to walk. This may be a terrible analogy because I'm not a parent, but play along with me.
We'll go with it.
But they're not walking when you expected them to walk. I don't know. When do kids walk? I know it's different for boys and girls, but like 9 months, 10 months?
Somewhere in the 9 to 13 month range for 14 months.
Let's say it's 15 months. Your kid's not walking, but they went to the doctor. Everything's fine. Everything looks great neurologically. Everything looks great muscularly. Like, they're going to walk. So what are you going to do? Give up on them because it's 14 months and it hasn't happened yet? No. You're going to hold space for them. You're going to love them. And hopefully you'll feel calm and you'll know like it's going to happen. Like everything is fine. They're just taking their time. I feel like if we can have that level of trust and understanding with ourselves, because I feel like we are active creators. Imagination is part of us. It's our birthright. We all have imagination. We just, for some reason, got the picture that it was intelligent to maybe dim it in a certain way, or we just literally never saw something else, right? Just never had that fire fed. But once awareness is in the game, once consciousness is online and we understand and we bring loving attention and some creativity, like maybe a meditation here or there to get us in the mood, get us in the
get us in the right zone right neurologically,
alpha frequency, gamma, once that happens, we will find it. So we can be really gentle. We could be really like loving. And it's kind of amazing if we don't let ourselves get hooked into the, oh my God, what's the matter with me? Like blah, blah, blah. I'll never figure it out storyline. If we don't hook into that consciousness, it's kind of cool, right? Like we're rediscovering our gift of absolute creativity.
Yeah. And we're rediscovering the reality-based nature of it, right? Like you were saying, this fire is going to burn. Like once that's really what's on the table, we approach it in a very different way and it becomes so intimate. Thank God. Instead of just some sort of generic fantasy, it's like, no, what's really alive for you? Because it will come through. Like if you have a practice where you're really encountering what used to be a blind spot and feeling into something new, like it's going to come on through. And suddenly the stakes are way different, not in a like scary way, but in a like, ooh, I have to get really real. I have to get really real with my limitations. And then I have to get really real with my desires and play with life like it's this awesome scavenger hunt because it's already all coming through. It's not the, like you were saying, stuck in time, when will I finally cross the finish line? When will it finally all come together? It's like it's all happening all the time. So can we walk around through our lives like, what's the clue for today? Like what's the fun thing that's going to come in? And then if something really big comes in, like it did for me this past week, then it's like, ooh, now we're really cooking. Like what's it communicating? What are the other things woven into it that it's requiring of me? How does that feel? What does that mean? How does that shift things? And it becomes so much more playful, and it's happening in constant ongoing time called just your life, as opposed to that over there time.
Yeah, I feel like time, when we use that concept of time, we're usually using it to somehow prove that our beliefs are right or we're messed up. Like,
yeah,
why haven't
totally.
you done it yet? Why hasn't life given it to me yet? It must be that I'm undeserving the way I thought, or I'm doing it wrong, or life is as bad as I thought, or, whatever. Times like the way the ego tries to prove that whatever it believed is correct because it holds it up next to this
Yes.
thing called time, which is really funny. I mean, like everything, where to begin? I feel like we've probably said this over and over again, but I have to keep being reminded. So why not say it as a reminder? Starting with compassion, kindness, and love is always the right frequency. It's always the right consciousness, because if we don't have compassion and kindness and love, it's hard to have trust if it took us 15 months to walk instead of 12 months. It's hard to understand, if I'm codependently wired that other people have to be happy with me for me to know my worth, like, I'm not going to have a differing opinion. It's not even going to occur to me have a differing opinion, or I may people please, or, okay, so that's happening and I can shift that. But if we don't have kindness and compassion and understanding, we just keep using everything as an opportunity to prove our original belief, whatever that is. So I feel like if you want to know, like, where to begin, like you were saying earlier, Brooke, you have an hour-long practice, but, you guys can do heart math. Mm-hmm. Get into heart coherence. It's an app. You have to buy it. You can go online. We'll put the resources on the website as we always do, but like, breathe into your heart. Find gratitude. It's a beautiful state because it's a compassionate state. So every day you're opening up the energy of love and compassion. Then as your awareness keeps expanding to see the patterns, see the error patterns, find a new dream, you'll have the consciousness of love to support you kindly and intelligently through the transformation, because you're going to transform. But if you keep bringing the same level of consciousness, the same belief into play, that same error pattern, like, but you're messed up, but life is.
Why hasn't it changed yet? What's wrong?
Then we're only ingraining the same imprint. So what about you? I like that. That's where gratitude or heart math is really easy. Anything that can get you in the state of consciousness, that's called like love, gratitude, and compassion.
Right. Yeah. Something that feels like all of those things, tenderness, whatever it is. Then like, if you want proof that you've shifted, first of all, if you actually want proof that you've shifted, probably you haven't, but it just feels like what the word open-hearted points to. It's softer, it's more tender, it's warm, it's loving, and we all have different ways where we connect with that, like you were saying. And there are a lot of great resources, and we've spoken with a lot of wonderful teachers who all have different ways pointing towards this. But if we can get in resonance with that, we're seeing the world differently, we're seeing ourselves differently, what we're capable of perceiving and the kinds of blinders that come off changes instantaneously in many cases, and then also in an unfolding way. And that's really the sweet spot. I love what you said, that's always the right frequency. You can't go wrong with compassion, self-love, tenderness. It's just kind of a sure thing there. Thank you for being a part of our community and for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any of the resources that we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. Each episode's separate post has the resources related to that episode. And our member platform is at patreon.com/blissandgrit, where you can donate to the show and get rewards for your support. If you're wanting to really engage with these topics in a deeper way, that is a great place to go. If you're wanting one-on-one support where you come up against your own conditioning or things that are just coming up in your life, Vanessa and I both also work with clients in private practice, and that information is on the Bliss and Grit website as well. And then, of course, there's Instagram, there's Facebook. You can subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out on Fridays. So there's a lot of different ways to connect. We're so grateful for all the reviews that you've written, for the membership support that you're all providing, and for the notes that you send. Here is a lovely recent review on iTunes from LNB Soccer 04. I love, love, love every single episode. I can't believe how much I'm just being cracked open and how my view of everything is just expanding. How I explained Brooke and Vanessa to my boyfriend, quote, they put the real human experience into spirituality. Before I thought of spiritual teachings as being a little hard to relate to and kind of out there, but they make it so relatable. I find this podcast so refreshing because, and this is in all caps, I don't have to change anything about myself. It's such an amazing feeling to just be able to listen and absorb their conversations without being overwhelmed with what next. What next I have to add on to a to-do list. Instead, I'm just curious about where this all could take me. That makes my heart so happy. Thank you, and we'll all be back next week.